What's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. This is John Edward, where we dissect complicated geopolitical and financial narratives into insights that actually make sense. Make sure you subscribe and activate those notifications. Over the past 48 hours, I've been fixated on a map showing the Dnieper River Basin alongside a batch of sensitive yet unclassified satellite intelligence that made its rounds with the Joint Chiefs right before the year turned. And I've got to be completely honest with you about what we're seeing here. I'm not broadcasting from the studio at the moment. There's no graphics crew, no research team, no vetted teleprompter running through multiple checks. I'm capturing this straight to my channel because of the incredible speed of recent developments. The manner in which the Ukrainian conflict shifted fundamentally, while everyone watched New Year's fireworks at Times Square, is progressing faster than any traditional broadcast network can keep up with. The narrative you're getting from mainstream media claims the stalemate persists, but that's incorrect. They're completely overlooking a subtle battlefield transformation that altered the Ukraine conflict overnight. We're not talking about a huge tank engagement or some D-Day-esque invasion. This is precise, methodical, and it concerns a particular thermal concealment technology that Ukrainian troops have just implemented throughout the entire Eastern Theater. Before I explain the mechanics and reasoning behind this, because there's substantial reasoning connected to the incoming US administration's involvement, hit that subscribe button on this channel. I'll be dropping in-depth update videos here as fresh intercepts emerge. My entire professional life has been dedicated to understanding the inner workings of the military-industrial apparatus. I understand the Pentagon's procurement processes. I know what directed energy signifies in budget allocations. And I understand that you can't transform the character of drone warfare without transforming how thermal signatures are detected on the battlefield. Here's what makes this week different. Throughout 2 years, the Ukrainian war has been a glasshouse conflict. Move and you're spotted. Get spotted and you're a target. Become a target and you're eliminated. Russian Orlan-10 drones have served as the Kremlin's surveillance, detecting thermal signatures from Ukrainian armor and individual troops from great distances. However, starting January 1st, 2026, these thermal signatures began vanishing. I've spoken with individuals briefed by contacts within Kiev's unmanned systems forces, and they've informed me Ukraine has just deployed a decentralized thermal concealment protocol. This goes beyond some sophisticated covering. This represents a systematic network-integrated masking apparatus utilizing inexpensive ground-deployed decoy units to overwhelm Russian thermal detection with thousands of false readings. For those versed in electronic warfare, this wasn't surprising. This was checkmate because Russian drones looking down now don't detect a tank. They detect 10,000 phantom tanks. And despite the Russian Ministry of Defense claiming they've eliminated hundreds of assets in the previous 48 hours, those were entirely decoys, each and every one. Russia's complete targeting infrastructure is now engaging phantoms, expending precision ordnance on vacant terrain while actual Ukrainian units maneuver undetected through passages that were non-existent 72 hours prior. Now, why am I sharing this on my channel rather than through the network? Because Washington's official narrative under the incoming administration's Pentagon suggests the conflict is basically finished and we require a negotiated resolution reflecting ground reality. But the ground reality they're referencing is 3 weeks outdated. Their peace framework relies on a battlefield that no longer exists. I've examined the acquisition records for the 2026 defense appropriation. They're cutting weapons funding for Ukraine. They're indicating to Moscow that negotiations are possible. But while DC politicians are crafting a one-sided framework demanding Kyiv relinquish territory, the Ukrainian armed forces are pursuing something entirely different. They're separating their tactical achievements from US political preferences. They're demonstrating that American endorsement isn't necessary to prevail in warfare if you possess the technological advantage to render your adversary sightless. If Ukraine were truly losing this conflict, why is Russia's army presently immobilized in Kyiv? Why are fewer than 70 Russian personnel remaining in the urban center? Because their supply chains have been rendered invisible. It resembles a Broadway performance where stagehands shut down all illumination and the principal performer, in this instance the Russian military, is fumbling in darkness while spectators are assured the production is tremendously successful. I'm here examining timestamps on these thermal irregularity assessments, questioning whether I'm the sole person actually reviewing them. The intelligence is reliable. Russia's command hierarchy is functioning on information that's 96 hours stale. And in contemporary warfare, that's beyond a disadvantage, that's fatal. So I began truly investigating, beyond the Truth Social updates, examining the geolocated video emerging from Central KNS. Here's my discovery, and this demands your attention. The Kupan's advancement occurred while global attention was diverted by U.S. actions in Venezuela. Ukrainian troops discreetly progressed near the P-79 highway. They didn't accomplish this through massive artillery bombardments. They utilized optical fiber drones avoiding radio transmissions, drones trailing physical wires. You cannot jam them. You cannot deceive them. They are essentially impervious flying precision weapons. Each drone costs below a quality used vehicle, yet they're destroying Russian armored assets valued at millions. The cost effectiveness here is remarkable, and it's fundamentally rewriting modern warfare economics. Then I examined the language. While the U.S. administration discusses transactional sovereignty across the Americas, they're attempting to implement a freeze and pressure strategy in Ukraine. They aim to freeze battle lines and pressure Zelensky toward an agreement. But the subtle transformation I'm examining makes freezing impossible. If battle lines remain invisible to Russian detection, the freeze exclusively advantages whichever side maintains visibility. And through very particular satellite coordination with the EU, not the US, but the EU, Ukraine retains vision. European satellites are transmitting real-time targeting intelligence to Ukrainian command while Russian forces are genuinely operating blind. This disparity is unprecedented throughout modern warfare history. The resumption of fighting in Sumy Oblast was just documented yesterday by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian troops are resuming operations there. Traditional media characterizes this as a fresh offensive, but examining the limited infiltration methods they're employing, this isn't offensive action. This represents a frantic effort to locate the Ukrainian position. They are testing the boundary like someone blindfolded in wilderness because their thermal vision has been eliminated. Russian commanders are dispatching small reconnaissance elements into areas they believe are vacant. And these elements are disappearing, not withdrawing, not capitulating, simply vanishing because they're entering kill zones they cannot identify until too late. Now, let's discuss how this is being presented on official platforms, or more precisely, how the peace agreement is being constructed. I spent 2 decades in newsrooms. I understand editorial decision-making processes, and there's content in this 28-point White House proposal that under normal circumstances would constitute front-page constitutional emergency material, yet it's absent. The quiet is striking. On Sunday, a particular network that's been previewing the administration's foreign policy broadcast a segment about inevitable Ukrainian compromises. Total duration, 15 minutes. Experts consulted 4 times. They acknowledged the plan was created without Ukrainian participation. 0. They're emphasizing ending casualties. They're emphasizing American taxpayer expenses. But they're ignoring that the U.S. is presently negotiating a sovereign ally's capitulation to a dictator who is launching drones over his own capital daily throughout 2026 thus far. I've consulted journalists I know, colleagues I've collaborated with for years, and privately they'll acknowledge the White House framework is essentially a Kremlin wish list. But publicly silence because pressure exists. Not direct threats, but access pressure. If you pose inconvenient questions about why we're rewarding Putin for unprovoked aggression, you forfeit the interview. You lose the exclusive. You miss the background briefing. This is manufactured consent functioning. It's not conspiracy. It's simply how the apparatus operates when pivoting from complicated warfare. Editorial sessions occur. Talking points get circulated. Unasked questions matter more than asked ones. Why does this subtle battlefield transformation matter tremendously? Because it's not genuinely about Tiance or Tsunami. It's about whether technology can outpace transactional diplomacy. If Ukraine can successfully achieve thermal invisibility and employ optical fiber drones maintaining positions without U.S. components, then Washington's push to negotiated resolution becomes meaningless. The U.S. cannot impose a freeze on continuing warfare. We're beyond a world where great powers, the US, Russia, China, determine border locations. We're in a world where a decentralized, technologically capable middle power can dismiss the great powers because they possess the concealment technology supporting it. This represents the nightmare scenario for conventional geopolitics. A world where military dominance doesn't derive from defense budget magnitude, but from engineer creativity and doctrinal flexibility. So here's my question for you presently. If they can successfully obscure a Russian offensive through a decentralized drone system, what limits exist? What occurs when this technology spreads? What happens when Taiwan acquires it? What happens when every disputed boundary on Earth suddenly accesses thermal invisibility? The ramifications are massive, and nobody in Washington wants discussion because it undermines great power politics' entire foundation. I'm not exaggerating. I'm observing the trajectory. 2025, the grinding stalemate. December 2025, the White House Kremlin peace framework leaks. January 2026, the thermal concealment deployment. The distance between Ukraine is failing, and Ukraine has just altered battlefield physics is shrinking. And that frightens people in Moscow and DC secured facilities because they cannot manage the narrative traditionally. Control demands visibility, and visibility is precisely what just disappeared from the battlefield. Strategic planning documentation written 6 months prior is now obsolete. Peace negotiation assumptions are now void. But nobody wants admission because admission means restarting completely. This recalls what we discovered researching for my recent project, Burn Order, a series examining unconstitutional Japanese-American incarceration during World War II. Fundamentally, it's about how executive orders can circumvent every check and balance we possess. When utilizing executive authority, abandoning a security commitment like our Ukrainian guarantee, you're beyond changing trade policy. You're changing what American promises mean. In Burn Order, we located government documents that were literally collected and incinerated, hiding policy truth. Today we lack fire. We have secretly drafted peace plans and sensitive yet unclassified memorandums claiming Ukraine has no victory path. But the subtle transformation I'm examining, that's the truth they're attempting to incinerate. They're attempting burial beneath diplomatic language layers and pragmatic realism, but intelligence doesn't deceive. The truth is Russia is losing the attrition conflict. Their economy is forecasted to decline to 1.5% growth annually. Their casualties are approaching 1.22 million, including 990 yesterday exclusively, per the general staff. And now they cannot even observe the enemy they're supposedly engaging. Russia's defense sector is cannibalizing civilian infrastructure, maintaining ammunition output. Their recruitment initiatives are exhausting resources. And now their surveillance technological advantage has vanished overnight. This isn't stalemate. This is gradual collapse disguised as strategic patience. Here's the fundamental issue. If you listen to talking points, they'll claim the US has no alternative but cutting a deal because we're depleting ammunition. They'll mention the $100 billion we've invested is exhausted. But what they'll omit is that $100 billion didn't reach Ukraine. It reached Alabama factories, Ohio facilities, Pennsylvania plants building next-generation concealment tech, now proving itself on the P-79 highway. We're not rescuing Ukraine. We're observing a warfare future laboratory. And the incoming US administration move, the 28-point framework, is shutting down the laboratory right as the experiment succeeds. The timing is questionable. The urgency is fabricated and the beneficiary is transparent. Why? Because Ukrainian victory doesn't suit the transactional model. Ukrainian victory means international law actually functions. Ukrainian victory means you cannot simply seize what you desire because you're a great power. And for those presently controlling Washington, that's an extremely inconvenient truth. It establishes precedent, confirms aggression has repercussions. It proves alliances signify more than quarterly financial reports and commercial agreements. And that kind of world where principles outweigh transactions terrifies people who constructed their entire worldview on the concept that everything and everyone has a price. So they're attempting to accelerate the peace framework. They are attempting to secure signatures before thermal concealment makes Russia's position entirely unsustainable. They desire frozen conflict while Putin retains something to grasp. They want to secure Russian territorial acquisitions before battlefield reality makes those acquisitions unmaintainable. The diplomatic pressure is intensifying, the communications are occurring, the private negotiations are being arranged. But everything relies on an assumption that the warfare is static. And that assumption just became fatally incorrect. And here's what I want your consideration. If Ukraine is genuinely defeated like official assessments claim, then why were nearly 1,000 drones intercepted over Moscow in one night? Why are Russian air defense installations consuming missiles faster than replacement rates? Why is commercial aviation being redirected from major Russian airports daily? The contradiction is obvious. You cannot be prevailing in warfare while your capital endures constant aerial bombardment. You cannot claim total battlefield supremacy while your logistic systems are collapsing. But the narrative continues because acknowledging truth would demand complete policy reassessment. And that reassessment would be politically inconvenient for both Moscow and Washington. I don't know what happens following this upload. I don't know if some press secretary who hasn't reviewed the ISW report from January 4th fact checks me. I don't know if anyone still cares about thermal irregularity maps anymore. But I know I've stated it. You possess the information now. You've observed the patterns. What you do with it, that's your decision. Most people will simply close this and resume their routines. They'll view the official 6 o'clock news report about peace negotiations, and they'll accept the official narrative of inevitable Ukrainian surrender. But some of you, perhaps just a handful, will start searching for the geolocated T-79 highway footage. You'll start examining the flight interruptions at Vnukovo Airport in Moscow and ask the proper questions, and you'll discover I'm correct. The intelligence is available. The intercepts are emerging. The truth is accessible for anyone willing to look beyond the manufactured consensus. If you found this analysis insightful, subscribe to John Edward, activate the bell notification, and distribute this video because understanding the convergence of money, power, and strategy is more critical today than ever. Stay informed, stay prepared, and we'll continue reviewing the moves shaping our